My name is Jonathan Bachrach. I'm the director of 120710. Thank you for coming. We're going to start a panel on the future of art school. The current show is called Dude, Where's My School? It consists of a number of SFAI alums, and they have recently lost their school. So the backdrop is the recent closing of SFAI. And so we thought it was a good time to reflect on what would be a better version of art school that would be more scalable, more inclusive, and more sustainable. So very happy to have a very distinguished group of people here, two alums of SFAI and two professors, one from SFAI and one from Berkeley. I just want to start by saying what 1207 is. We're here to disrupt the arts. Josh and I are co-founders, and we are looking at ways to have positive impact on the arts. The premise is that if we have a high quality venue and build community, the rest would follow. That's the simplest thing. We're starting very simple, we're experimenting, and we're 2 shows in. So also, 120710 is a safe house for creativity. It's non-commercial. It's a place to experiment and practice making art. We don't make money on art. There's no pressure to sell. And 100% of the art sales goes to the artist. Okay, so with that said, we're going to start the panel, and we're going to start with introductions, and then 1 to 3 minute statements on the future of art. So we'll start with Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the curator of Dude, Where's My School, and was a SFAI alum in 2016. Graduated from the painting department, and I'm making work still, curating shows down in Los Angeles, and working on this wonderful project with Jonathan here at 120710. Intros first, and then our, yeah, okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Kaufman. I am a painter. I'm also doing printmaking and fiber arts as well right now. And I went to SFAI for my MFA and graduated in 2017. And I also earned a BFA from the University of Tennessee in 2012. And yeah, I'm just living here in Oakland, making art, working in nonprofits.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Steinfeld. I'm a professor at, here at Berkeley. My home department is the Department of Architecture. I've been teaching here for about 12 years. 12 years, thanks. And recently I've been involved in an institute in a new master's program called, the institute's called the Jacobs Center for Design Innovation, and the master's program is the Master of Design. So I'm I don't know a lot about the art world or the future of art education, but I speak today as kind of like a fellow traveler. We can talk about the challenges we've been facing over in the design side of things. Let's see. That's probably good. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Hi, my name is Jonathan DeFazio. I was class of 1984 at the Art Institute for my MFA. And then even back in '84, the Bay Area was too expensive, so I moved to New York and lived there for 20 years as a practicing artist, doing a lot of commercial jobs, working for MTV, Pee-wee's Playhouse. So that was the bread and butter, but always maintaining a ceramic studio with a kiln for my main art practice. So after 9/11, I moved back to San Francisco, and I've been teaching at the Art Institute and at CCA for 20 years as an adjunct, which was like a horrible trend in the art world to just have part-time teachers and not have tenure or benefits or retirement. So that's like the awful part of what the Art Institute did to the faculty and one of the problems of it. I don't want to be too negative. So I'll hand this back to you.
Okay. Let's go around now and do statements.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of any one person having a solution for for an art school or where we're going with the arts, but I think like the things that went really well with SFAI, at least from a student's perspective, is being able to really have the intensive feedback from your peers and being able to gather around works and make things that you really only had thought up just recently and really kind of work through those emotions and thoughts. And I love the way that kind of shortened your feedback loop to be able to produce better work and understand why you're making these things better. The one thing, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this, that I feel like the feedback loop was really extended or not there at all, was really on the professional side, and like how can artists operate once they're out of art school, right, or with the studio. And I think if we can find ways to enhance an artist's experience, both as a creator, but then also as an entrepreneur, as an individual that can then operate with that practice beyond the confines of the school, that's where I really think there's opportunities to kind of enhance the system or enhance the opportunity of students that are paying all this money and all this time to really pursue this as a field of study and a field of their passion. So I think that there's opportunities there that I think we can examine a little bit better, whether it be understanding how to market your work, understanding how to market yourself, how to build websites, how to, we're dealing with a lot of that right now for this space. And I think there's a huge learning curve that if you just leave to artists to do on their own, can be overwhelming at times. And I think that if we can nurture that process and the time that we're also nurturing their work, that we ultimately will have better outcomes for artists. And that's just kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, when I think about the future of art school in general, I think there's a larger issue of should kids go to school at all? And,
Step out for a second.
I mean, being 18 and asked to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life is a big responsibility. And I am glad that I took the path that I took, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, really. And I knew that I was creative, and I knew that I loved art, and I knew that that was important to me, and I found a safe haven in art school, and I found a place where I I was valued for my individuality and for the work that I was interested in making, and also I find it incredibly important to understand the history of art and have put myself in a context of who am I in relation to this very, very long history of art. And recently, the way I've been thinking about art school, and this kind of piggybacks off what Josh was saying, is why do people studying medicine, they go and they do a residency. If you're studying to become a teacher in elementary and middle and high schools, you go and you do a practicum, you do a year, under another teacher. Why can't we return to that apprenticeship model? That's really the main thing that I felt like I lacked from art school was, and I had the opportunity to go and work for an artist after school for a couple of years, and that's where I learned the most about how to actually practically run an art business. And it just feels like such a faux pas to talk about it like a business when you're in school, and people will make you feel bad about it, but that's just the reality for me was I needed to learn those practical skills, and so I have some ideas about that.
So again, speaking as kind of more of a fellow traveler than someone with any answers at all, in architecture, we think of ourselves, we call ourselves a discipline. And I think it's because if you do the wrong thing, you're going to get in trouble a lot of times. And one thing that we're burdened by in our discipline is this narrative, the story of a kind of heroic autonomy that we hold, a kind of privileged position, like we know better than the folks that we're designing for, speaking historically, of course, and that we hold this kind of position of power, and this is expressed in our educational institutions in a number of ways. There's a very high wall around the architectural often. And I bring this up because this is something that we're grappling with, and we have been for some time, but it's become more acute in the past few years. I think there's been a lot of let's say, useful tumult in the past few years, and this has sparked a kind of reconsideration of that position and what it means to train an an architect and educate an architect in our educational institutions, and how to break down that wall. So I think in some ways it's a shame when any institution that's generated such of cultural import dies, goes away, but perhaps it's also a moment of productive reimagination of what we can do together. And perhaps a part of it is about getting rid of that wall between, for us, it's about the communities we serve and the kind of design conversations that we have from internally, how to make that more porous or completely erode entirely. I heard you mention removing a barrier between practice and education and being more upfront about the realities of practice. I think all of these are good things. And so that resonates about kind of getting past that barrier really resonates with me.
I think for most of the 20th century, the Bauhaus School was the model for art education. After World War I, 1919, they wanted to merge art, craft, performance. Architecture was a huge part of it. Walter Gropius was the founder. And so even the building of the art school was worked into the structure of what art education was. And it definitely took off here in America. And so what was great about the Bauhaus School is it was all about new technologies, which for the early 20th century was film and photography were the new things. And so that spread, but it might have also spread everything too thin in respect to fine arts, because it wasn't art for art's sake. It was art for utility, for the masses, for the people. And I think the Art Institute, to its credit, was one of the last art for art's sake schools, where they purposely did not have a design program or architecture, or it was talked about a number of times, but they purposely wanted to keep it to what was referred to as the academy, not thinking about the academy university, but an academy where if you wanted to learn painting, you took 4 years of painting. Printmaking, you focused just on disciplines, where it wasn't so watered down and interdisciplinary. And again, the Art Institute is the last surviving model of that. And it just wasn't sustained. I feel like fine artists are an endangered species at this point, and we need support to keep free thinking. If it's just like utilitarian, it's not going to be art that moves you intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and I think that's the crisis we're in right now. So at this point, I think the universities can save fine art programs if they set up structure and understanding of leaving hands off. The other thing with like teaching, maybe you experience this too, when we're setting up our syllabuses, it's all about learning outcomes, like that buzz phrase. You have that at Berkeley too?
Yeah, bullet points.
Everything is supposed to have a job application to it. It's not just art that is going to represent your culture, your group, your tribe. It's about like, how can you make money from this? Because you're spending $50,000 a year, it's a professional practice at that point. And so that was the whole problem. There weren't enough parents supporting their children going to school just for pure art. It became, it had to be job related, pretty much. That's my perception within the past 20 years of teaching both at CCA and the Art Institute. I'll pass this down.
Yeah, I don't, do we have a, is it not free form?
I'll fill in with questions.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm just connecting something that you were talking about to something we were talking about earlier, which is the kind of the need, like those bullet points on my syllabus are indications of like, how does this experience fit in as an instrument in a larger machine? How do the gears turn together in order to produce a reliable outcome, right? Like it's a mechanistic sort of model of what education is, and I think it's absolutely related to financial outcomes. Why is that? Like, why has this shift occurred? When you talk to my students, they're very interested to make sure that the investment they're making in their education, financial investment, not investment of time or energy or mind, pays off. Many of them, and I think it's a good question to ask. It should, but they're in that position because most of them have taken out quite a few loans in order to have that experience, and that's a financial investment that must pay off for them. If we rewind the clock, we're now in a position where we're very much aware where the student loan model is unsustainable and crumbling, right? How did we get into this student loan sort of framework, this way of doing things, where students are financing their own education for the most part and are looking for that kind of financial payoff? It's the disinvestment in public education that happened decades ago, primarily under Reagan, and the student loan programs were ramped up as a kind of salve to deal with that. So it really kind of goes back to this kind of disinvestment in public good, and that gets everyone involved in the mindset of producing a product efficiently and delivering that product in a way that pays off financially for its customers. This is part of the problem. This is the root of the problem. But I don't know if it's the way of unwinding it, to say that all we need to do is go back to a 1970s model of public education funding, although that sounds great. I'm not sure if it's politically feasible, and I think there also are probably other models that are ahead of us. I don't think it's about kind of looking back and winding back the clock, but I think there might be other models ahead of us that are even more radical and maybe even more supportive of a kind of growth of and even more supportive. So.
Okay, well, that was very interesting. I want to get back to what worked and didn't work. You touched on it a little bit, but you too, that went to SF, and John as well. What did you really enjoy? What was very productive and worthwhile at SFAI, and then what were things that weren't, you'd want to improve on?
Yeah, I think, John, you mentioned, just being able to have the free-form ability to focus for 4 years on one thing, right, or really discover your narrative within like this art canon, right, and trying to refine what that looks like. And I think that is something that SFAI did extremely well, right? There wasn't the confines, sometimes in a jarring way, where you're like, well, is this even good or bad painting? And that wasn't really the right question. And I think it was teaching us to ask the right questions. And I think that was something that not a lot of other schools had done quite in the same way. And what I still kind of really miss about SFAI, or just having a place like that exists, honestly, because it is so rare in this day and age. And so I think that's something that I always felt SFAI did incredibly well, and was one of the things that was most transformative for me. And then, of course, I think the things that I think could have been better were more of the support for people after school, not just for artists, but for faculty as well. And I think also just being transparent in the way things operate. And I think that even if it wasn't a business class or anything there, but just having the operation of the school be more transparent and inclusive and responsible could have been a little bit more of a guide for students and faculty to understand kind of how their careers and their time with this institution were going to evolve and how we can make the most of that. And I wish that things, again, just obviously in hindsight, could have been managed better. And I think that could have provided more opportunity for everyone involved, honestly, and not have money been wasted on things that were more frivolous. So those are kind of just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was talking to my partner about this last night, and the difference between, for me, what was so exciting too about going to art school was I could see these people that are older versions of who I want to be, of myself, as I could model my life after them. Like I didn't grow up around a lot of people who were, pursuing their art, and to be able to have that model was really huge. And also, the visiting artists that came to the school and the lectures that they gave was really inspiring, especially when I was an undergrad, because I was in the middle of Tennessee. I wasn't seeing people who were actual artists living their lives, and these people would come from all over the world and give talks about their life, and, all these lights were going off, like, oh wow, this is feasible, this isn't like a total pipe dream. And that was really great to have that, be in that like very kind of utopian environment where I felt very supported and cared for. And, and then at SFAI, I thought it was really great because they had one-on-one tutorials in the grad program. And to be able to work one-on-one with an instructor of your choice was really powerful, to have that time outside of the class, outside of the critique. That was really impactful for me. And, I think also the community, it's really important to talk about that. I think that extends far beyond school. And, when I was applying for graduate programs, I realized I'm applying for a place, I'm applying to the faculty, I'm applying to build relationships with these people that are gonna be in my life, hopefully for decades. And that's something that was really fostered and concentrated in my time at SFAI, and I'm really grateful for that. But again, there are these aspects where I wish that we had had a little bit more practical skills, given to us. And again, that could come in the form of apprenticeships or mentorships. And I think it's also really, really impactful to be a mentor, to a younger student. So, yeah, that's kind of my view on that.
I didn't go to art school.
To build on to what Becky was saying, I think like one of the important things is the dating pool at art schools. Everybody's on the same page, they all love art, and your pheromones are just, bouncing off the walls. So that's something intangible that art schools can deliver that other academic programs maybe don't have quite the impact. Back in the
all college university campuses.
Yes, you're probably right. Yes. Yes.
The argon from the welding gas makes everything, it just...
Yes, but like back in the 70s and 80s, it was common to see somebody naked in the fish pond. I didn't see that recently, but I just think that the world got more conservative the past, 20 years. Again, Reagan. Now that we're in Berkeley, I think I can just remind you all that when Reagan was the governor, there were anti-Vietnam War protests, and so Reagan ordered the National Guard to fence off where the protest area was and to have helicopters drop tear gas onto the students, knowing that they couldn't escape on the side streets because they had barricades. It was Reagan torturing students because of a point of view that he disagreed with. So that's where everything went south, in my opinion, of witnessing culture finding a low point. And then when he became president, of course, it spread to the rest of the world. But getting back to the Art Institute, it was the studio practice that was the most important thing that they pushed. But also ideas behind what you were doing, questioning you, the critiques, that was all the important parts of the Art Institute. But even the Art Institute would scrimp on the junior and senior years. They would have enough classes for beginners and sophomores, but then you were just unleashed on your own Like they didn't have advanced classes, like they didn't want to pay for them. And so the tutorials that you mentioned, all the faculty got paid half a class for those tutorials. So you probably paid a full class unit and the administration. And that's the other biggest reason the Art Institute closed, is the administration was incompetent and greedy with their six-figure salary for a school that had 300 people towards the end. It's not Ivy League. You shouldn't be getting $250,000 to run a school with a few students. So that's the biggest problem with why there is no more. Dude, where's my school? The administrators flushed it down the toilet and put their pockets filled with money. And the other thing, Art Institute specifically, it was tuition-based support. The number of students that you had, that was your budget. It was not like big trustees that were paying to support the school. So that's what a independent art school needs, is a board of trustees making the financial to make it happen. It doesn't happen by tuition dollars. And that was the big mistake.
We need a Carnegie.
Yes.
Endowment.
Yeah.
I heard that, there was like that moment, I think post 2020 when University of San Francisco was supposed to acquire the school and kind of extend their art program into SFAI, which was going to kind of save the day. And I heard that the reason that went south was because the administrators said that they wanted to be acquired as well with their salaries and everything, and that ultimately is what cost the deal, is that they wanted these really absorbent salaries to go with the sale of the school, and they just said no, we're not going to do that, especially after you just ran it into the ground. And so that costed all the faculty an opportunity to kind of stay on and for artists to be able to have that. And yeah, I definitely think that there was many moments in the history of SFAI where greed was gone awry, and it ultimately led to the worst possible outcome, unfortunately. But I think people are seeing that now and hopefully learning from that in a real way. But yeah, just thought that was an interesting caveat that I had heard when putting the show together. So appreciate you saying that.
Okay, let's move on to just thinking forward about how to make art school more inclusive or scalable, and what mechanisms we might be able to tap into to do that beyond endowments. How appropriate would it be to do some amount of online education, which we're doing in pure science and other disciplines? Is there some subset to scale out? If we talk about scaling out education, right? Like how much can we do that in art?
Yeah, that's a good question. First and foremost, anything to make it cheaper would be a place to start. But I think that, yes, definitely things online, in the same way that, a critique helps you understand, which questions to ask or what's working and what's not in your work. Yes, there's a certain special quality that comes with looking at the work in person and all these things. But I do think that the communal aspect is something that can still exist online, and that is still, I think, today fostered through social media and meetups that are sort of based, ad hoc and stuff. And I think that that's all fine and well. And I think that ultimately artists need other artists to build community and to learn more about the things that they're doing relative to what other people are doing or how they're answering similar questions, right? And I think that if you can find ways to do that online or in local community groups, and then somehow bring that under an umbrella, whether it be a gallery or an institution or university, then that's something that's great. And maybe the in-person exists for people of a higher privilege that can afford certain things, but not to exclude people that can't from that conversation. And I think that having a way to kind of bridge that gap is really important, and ultimately is what brings diversity to any program. And it's something that I hope that they, in any of the program in universities, really champion going forward.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean by scalable when it comes to art school. Can you elaborate?
I just mean being able to accommodate more people who want to go to art school, but in particular people from lower income backgrounds, yeah, and yeah, maybe other places around the world.
Okay. Yeah, so more inclusive. Yeah, I think I really hate this Zoom world that we're living in, and I think it really. I know that it connects people. I know that there are a lot of really great things about it, but it's not the same as being there in person with a work of art. You know, you can't see something just on a screen. Even if there's a video, you can't feel it and touch it and be in the presence of it and other people, which I think it's incredibly important. And I'm really glad that I wasn't in school during all of this Zoom thing, and I'm sorry for everybody that has to deal with that. But also, having said that, I do think that there is an opportunity, and I'm seeing it in different communities online where there are like critique groups, and a lot of these programs are you pay to play, which I don't really love, but it is a way for artists to connect with other artists, to give each other opportunities, to pass names along, which I think is really important. And so in that way, yes, okay. But I think in terms of like studio time, instruction, it needs to be in real life, in the flesh, and I don't see why it has to be so many people. Like, why can't it just be small? Why can't classes be smaller? I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I learned a lot more in a class with 10 other people than I did in a lecture with 200 people sitting in the room, and like it didn't matter if I was there or not. So yeah, I think about, speaking of Bauhaus, the model of Black Mountain College, and where artists, it was a non-hierarchical model. There were only, I think, 2 required classes that you had to take. And artists were there, and everyone was required to work. You had to do like farm work and kitchen work and construction, or everyone had to work. That was your tuition. You didn't pay, and so I love that, and I know that that's utopian and maybe not realistic for the world that we're living in now. But there was no accredited degree that came after that. You could decide when you wanted to graduate, and I love that. That's really art for art's sake. That's really like what I think when I think of doing it for the love of art and not just for the piece of paper, or the approval from your dad, and I think that if we could return to that in some way, the world would be a better place, or the art world would be a better place.
Yeah, I think that like now, this is, I don't know the Black Mountain College, but I think that this is potentially a right time for that kind of thinking, even though it's utopian, and even though not every idea will work, but I think I think now is the right context in which to rethink the structures that we're working with in that kind of in that deeper way. There's a few different things. Zoom, or like online education. I think in many ways I love this Zoom world that we're in, because I don't have to go to another committee meeting in person. Those are great. There's things that like I want to offload into that kind of way of like disconnected connection, right? I'd imagine like something like Physics 101 works well in a class of 300 people. It's a machine. Just crank that lever. Something like art, I imagine, or for me, design, for sure, it does not work at scale. I think it's unscalable. And the reason why it's unscalable, like I can't teach a studio course with more than, I used to say 13 students, now I'm up to I've been pushed up to 15, but this is where we're at, right? It'll never be 30, 60, 100, never. And it's because interaction between instructor and student is a particular thing, but also design is a communal activity. It's about community, about being in a place with people. It's about being among people. You build trust with your peers. You learn just as much from your peers and seeing what they're doing as you do from your instructors, if not more. And like being in a, I'm going to keep using a spatial metaphor, being together in a place and embarking on this activity together is a hugely important part of it. And communities just don't scale that way. right? I mean, we live in big cities, of course, now, but we have little bubbles of community within that we seek out and we kind of work within, right? And you know, villages can only get so big. So I think that if you wanted to scale something like art education, it's not about building bigger bubbles, because that's not really what's happening there. It's more like, I think that it would be more focused on establishing more centers, establishing more environment in which things like that can grow. There's still going to be a certain scale, because that's the scale at which they work, but there could be more of them. And so what is it like, what is a nutrient-rich environment that could grow this sort of slime mold of, it's a good slime mold. What kind of environment would feed that and that kind of growth most effectively? Are the kinds of things that I would think about. Pass the mic.
Yeah, I was just thinking about teaching sculpture on Zoom for 2 years during the pandemic. And
Oh my God, did you?
Yes.
Put the camera on the other side.
And so I would have to say, well, if you can't buy clay or resin or whatever you want to do, go in the kitchen and make some bread sculptures, you know, dough sculptures. That's something that you could do. Or carve a bar of soap. And I think that was an old Bauhaus project, something small, you know, you're whittling, you're making maquettes, essentially. I would encourage that. But adding to that is a third of the students on Zoom were in China. So it was 2 a.m. in China and a 10 a.m. class here in the Bay Area. And so they had to really make a commitment and upend their lives to go to classes and get their degree in America, which would be more valuable than a degree in China. And then China didn't have a lot of fine art programs to begin with. So that was a real challenge, but it was trippy. I felt like I was on a space station, you know, with people all around. Also, there were people on the East Coast, so, you know, 3-hour difference in Florida. But it worked. But what you were saying is you learn through proximity of watching other students develop ideas is the most important thing. And social skills, developing social skills at the college, all of that, or how to work communicatively in a studio, sharing power tools that could, you know, rip your fingers off and all of that. Those are things you need to do in a group, and to witness. There's a distance if you're watching like a video on how to use power tools. It's not the same thing. And for the most part, students would just show their finished work for critiques on Zoom. So you'd see the finished object, but not, the video camera wasn't on 24/7, and you didn't see the process, which is the most important part, I think, is the process.
Okay, well, we've come to the section where you guys get to ask questions and comments, so I'd like to hear the first person. Say your name and give us your question.
John?
John Rogers. I'm a graduate of CCAC, and watching CCA turn into this runaway train, how does that, is it working? Just in counterpoint to the Art Institute, have you been teaching at CCA recently? How is that working? Is it working? What's going on with the administration? I mean, I don't want to sideswipe it from SFAI, but just something that is sustaining itself seemingly, or maybe it is just kind of putting off the inevitable. Just kind of curious to see what that model is happening.
The advantage that CCA has is the architecture program is huge, their design program, and they're also including new fields. They just added a video gaming degree, MFA in comic book art, and so they're trying to diversify the curriculum, but it's the design programs that are supporting the school. And unfortunately, the fine art program is shrinking at CCA.
And is enrollment or alumni contribution that's helping with the design program? I'm kind of leading the discussion.
Absolutely. Fine art painters don't support the school. Yeah, they don't give endowments. It's
I'm not sure designers do either. it's funny for me to be thought of as like the rich department. I'm next to engineering. They're the rich department. Yeah.
But I think maybe there's a 1/3 enrollment deficit at CCA.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that's directly related to the Chinese students not choosing to come back to America. The rich Chinese now go to London to study art. They don't come to San Francisco, or maybe they go to New York schools, but...
And I think there's better and better schools in China.
Yeah, it's starting to, yes. But it's going to survive. They're building a new campus. They built, I think, 2,000 dorm rooms. So that almost like means they'll have 2,000 students eventually. Right now, they're not even filling all of the dorms. But I think that was a smart move, doing that. But, they'll survive. The Art Institute couldn't, but they will.
Diversity of programs.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Izzy. Hi. Okay, so I just wanted to hear what each of you thought, like how you see neurodivergence in wherever environment you end up being or like plan to be in the future. How do you see that kind of evolving from your perspective?
I mean, especially in art school, I think there's a lot of neurodivergence, and I think like it's where you get richness of ideas and that kind of diversity, not just like race or politics, but also thinking, right? And I think that's something that's important in any setting, like full stop. But in art school, especially when trying to think about the process, right? And like how different people are arriving at conclusions is very much dependent on the way that they think. And I think being exposed to a large subsect of that early on in your life, as you're sort of forming your own opinions about the world, is really enriching. And I think that's something that should be celebrated and fostered more, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you, Izzy. I think that, I think art school for me was a place where I could explore that side of me and not feel like I needed to mask or like become somebody else or, follow this prescribed route. And I was given the freedom to explore these things that I couldn't stop doing, and I was valued for it rather than being treated like, that's crazy, stop that, and I think that the world is changing around our awareness of neurodivergence, and I think that art schools are like the original place where people feel safe in that world.
I'm not quite sure how to respond, but I appreciate the question very much. I think right now at Berkeley, the neurodivergence is seen in the frame of disability and accommodation, right? Like this is the framework that's brought to it. And there's a lot of caring, thoughtful people who have tried to set up structures that from a place of goodwill and caring to within that kind of disability and accommodation mode to make sure that everyone has access to education. And I think that actually moving beyond that framework to a framework of just difference, right, and appreciating and embracing difference is a huge challenge. And honestly, I don't see anyone working on it in my world right now. Sorry, not the most great answer.
Whatever the answer is, it's an answer.
Thinking about inclusivity from a 40-year perspective of art school. My first art school was Kutztown State College in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I was the only openly gay student in a dorm of the football players. And so they would put like knives in my door saying, "Kill fags." And when my boyfriend moved into the dorm, they decided to play a prank and pour gasoline under our door and light our room on fire in the middle of the night, and we had to jump out the window. Luckily, it was a first floor window. So nothing was accounted for. No police report, nobody got in trouble, nobody was, kicked out of school. That's what it was 40 years ago. Now I'm teaching queer super objects and queer theory at CCA. So that's like a huge positive thing that has happened in the past 40 years. And it'll be even more inclusive, I'm sure, in the future, too. Because your generation is also embracing diversity and inclusion. So that's what I look forward to. Is the next 20-year jump in people just loving instead of hating.
Okay, who else has a question?
Hello, my name is Leah, and I've actually worked, even though I never went to art school and I'm not an artist, I've actually worked on this topic quite a bit, primarily at Stanford, although I'm an adjunct lecturer at Berkeley now. And so I'm super curious about the architecture school moving closer to the Jacobs Institute, because this is a big issue in many of the colleges that I work with of who plays nice together. And I'm curious how that happened and what might happen now at Cal.
Yeah, those issues still happen. I mean, I don't know if we play nice together. A little nicer. The architecture department is still firmly in the College of Environmental Design. I'm a scout that was sent out over to this other institute. But there's a little bit of there was a gift made to start the Institute for Design Innovation, and it was pointedly not given to the College of Design. It was given to the College of Engineering, and there was a little bit of tumult about that. But that's sort of past now, and we're all kind of getting over it. We're not feeling quite as left out anymore. We're feeling a bit more included. So that's fine. And I've learned a lot from my colleagues in engineering. Honestly, like it's been a really both like kind of challenging intellectually. Like I have had my assumptions challenged quite a bit, and I've grown a lot from the experience of being in this kind of interdisciplinary thing. I think what it comes back to, and maybe this is a way of tying it back to the conversation and out of the kind of institutional politics, that endowment came to the College of Engineering because of a growing awareness of the value of design, what they call design thinking in the engineering world, what we designers just call design. I'm hopeful that it might mark a bit of a shift. So, okay, now the engineers are interested in design, so we get institutions like this and they want to work with us, so we're playing a bit nicer together. That's wonderful. But maybe I'm hopeful that this introduces this sign of a bit of a shift away from this obsession that we have with STEM being the only thing of value in education, or so strongly emphasized and so strongly valued in education, into what I think John Maeda called STEAM, to put the A of the arts in there. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
At which point I think we're just talking about education, humanities, right?
Pre-Proposition 13 education, pre-Prop 13 education, because the arts were decimated after Prop 13.
Right, which is, I think, getting us back to a kind of more holistic look at whole people and valuing the humanities, just as much as we value the sciences and applications, and this is why I work at universities, because I love that stuff, right? But the holistically. So maybe this is a sign that kind of Silicon Valley mindset and the kind of overvaluing of practical engineering, mathematics, like the STEM stuff, maybe it's weakening. I don't know.
I guess I want comments of my comment. I have ties with Stanford, the SFAI, and now CCA, and I've seen a trend of perhaps not art education, just art education prevailing, but trying to bring arts into every other set of education. And now with the advent of AI, it seems like neurodivergent thought and thinking differently seems to be on top of every list of what seems to be what type of faculty or education university seems to be looking for. And I've been seeing more of my friends who teach art getting into different departments to teach different classes, hybrid classes. That's my case, I think, at CCA, where I'm teaching at the design. I'm an artist, I don't do design. I use design, but I think that's my, if they have that, you're not a designer, come here. But what do you think about that? And then, but now I'm thinking more slowly, I'm thinking that perhaps that's unfortunate for just institutions that primarily teach art, because I think what's happening is being decimated in order to overlap all facets of education. So kind of like art will be perhaps everywhere, but not concentrated. That's what I'm thinking, but I don't know what you have to say about this thought.
I really appreciate that comment, because I think it's something that we all kind of see, right, with like support for the arts going away. Like, where does it still exist, and where can it exist? And it's awesome to see that universities are taking that approach, and I've seen that with professors where like someone's a little bit not your traditional choice for that class gets placed in, and I think it's cool seeing that in a university setting, but I'd love to see it in like a professional setting or more of a wider scope, because I think everyone likes to talk about how much they love art and culture, and it's always the thing that drives the desire for new products or new events, right? But when it comes to actually supporting the artists to do the work to get to that point where other institutions can commercialize it, there just hasn't been enough support for artists to get there. And I think that for them to really be genuine about their claims about that with art and tech or art and whatever, right? You need to really bring artists into the conversation. I think that's full stop, not just in industry, but in politics, in every facet of society, because ultimately art and the humanities is what is driving all of us to some extent to be human. It is attached to who we are, and no matter how much we innovate, I think that's pretty integral to the human experience, and I'm hoping to see more of that integration on a wider scale, and maybe that is something that helps us scale the arts in some way as well. It's just sort of disseminating it into more of our daily life, because it's been so removed from our daily life in a big way, especially in this country, and so I hope we can live to see that change.
AI is dangerous because it's so seductive. Like, I love some of those surrealist photos of like things that don't exist in the real world, that the machine, it's like the collective consciousness of the machine is connecting and winning awards for art. But I think a big problem is that people don't know the difference between real art and fake art, and there's no connoisseurship anymore. If the Museum of Ice Cream gets more visitors than the Modern Art Museum, that is a bad sign for culture. And that's what's happening.
I mean, are they just different things? I mean, McDonald's gets more visitors than MoMA as well.
But then why do they call it a museum?
Well, that's the problem.
They're giving it a cultural packaging, as if it's important.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I think those tickets are like $35 or $40 to the ice cream museum.
It's a selfie museum. That's all it is. It's a place to make yourself look good on social media.
But on the other hand, I'm not going to defend the Museum of Ice Cream. Okay, I guess. The people who go there are paying for an aesthetic experience, and we might not support that, we might be able to criticize the depth of that experience. We can easily criticize the depth of that aesthetic experience. But how many aesthetic experiences are people, like all of us culturally, are we willing to pay for? And what are those? Just out in the world, right? So maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, I mean, offend the music ice cream. I don't know. Okay, it's a half thought and it went off the rail.
I will defend it because it's pure play. It's not a museum. Now, granted, you might criticize that they're choosing a word that is inappropriate, but they made it okay for adults to play.
What if it's a way in for people who don't? Maybe what if it's a way in for someone, right? And like the next one, maybe they learn like, oh wait a minute, I can go and I'll pay a little bit, and then like I'll have this. What other kind of aesthetic experiences are there out there that I might enjoy? And then they get deeper and deeper and deeper. So.
I love that entry point comment. Like, there's one example that I think of where it's art to ice cream is sort of an apples and oranges thing, but there's an example with like the Van Gogh exhibit. I don't know if anyone has seen that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like really interactive experience, similar to kind of the selfie vibe and encompassing installation of the Museum of Ice Cream or whatever. But very different from standing in front of the iris painting at the Getty, right? Or looking at Starry Night at MoMA, right? So I wonder, and I do think that for some people that may not understand the austerity or connoisseurship of a traditional painting, or what it means to stand in front of an oil painting and receive something of value from that, that this sort of immersive reinterpretation for maybe a different generation around similar things and thinking can allow people an entry point into this really rich history and tradition that I think otherwise may be forgotten. And I worry about that sometimes, being someone that's more inclined with a more austere experience. But I think these entry points and thinking about how we open up art to people, I think that was a great comment. I just want to
I want to take the other side again, though.
Yeah, please.
I disagree. It's like when we make those are my kids running around over there, and they sometimes hard to get them to eat vegetables or whatever. So there's this trick where I make the Japanese brown curry, and it's usually like carrots and onions and stuff in it, and I'll blend it with the immersion blender. I'm hiding the vegetables, right? Right? So maybe it's just like so this is the approach. It's like we're gonna slip this in, right? And then like they won't notice at first, but they're secretly eating the vegetables, unless you're doing it in a way that like leads you to carrots, real carrots, later on. Then it's not really an entry point. It's a substitute, and it's accommodation rather than kind of I'll use the word indoctrination if it's wrong, but like the leading. If it's not leading, if it's not intentionally done in that way, then which I bet they're more about making a buck and some Instagram photos, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, two sides of the same.
So, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone over on this side? We haven't represented you all. Anyone wanna ask a question? All right. Well, maybe we'll wrap it up here. And thanks a lot for coming.
What's the solution?
The solution, it's still in the works, We're gonna keep talking about that. Yeah, we're working on it.
You're soaking in it.
Yeah, keep coming. The shows. We got a good next show. New Moon Figure 8 starting in a couple weeks. Gabby Wolodarski is gonna curate that show. It's gonna open October 14th. Look forward to seeing you here then. All right, thanks for coming.